welcome to the Production Talk podcast with me, Yarn of mixartist.com.au. In this podcast series, we celebrate the modern way of producing music. We want to talk about all things related to songwriting, recording at home, and music production. So if you produce your music at home, this is the place to be. Please subscribe and recommend this podcast to all your friends. This is the Production Talk podcast, episode 13. Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into the Production Talk podcast again. It's great to have you on board. Since episode 10, we've worked our way along the production timeline through the different phases of music production. We've covered songwriting and creative workflows with Cheynne and TK, and I think that was a fantastic episode. Last week, I shared my take on the production mindset and how to know when a project is finished. I also spoke about my mixing philosophy and shared some tips about mastering. But after mastering, a project is not yet done. Today, we're opening a particularly tricky can of worms: marketing and promoting your music. According to Google, 60,000 songs are released on Spotify every day. A few years ago, that was 40,000, so it's fair to assume that this number will only ever go up. Therefore, you have to cut through somehow, and your success in the music industry depends to a large degree on effective marketing. You cannot release your songs and hope for the best, hope to be discovered or go viral without any further effort. And that's exactly where marketing and promotion comes in. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Cheynne Murphy, who is not only a phenomenal musician, but also a university lecturer for teaching digital marketing, arts and entertainment marketing, social media marketing, and consumer behavior. Cheynne has many decades of experience as a musician. He's played in huge stadiums overseas, but I still see him performing at the local farmers markets occasionally. Whatever Cheynne does, he puts 100% into it. And today I'd like to speak to him about the ever-changing ways of music production, how he produced his last album in times of the pandemic, and of course we are going to have a big yarn about music marketing and promotion. Okay, now it's time to get to the good stuff. Here's my interview with Cheynne Murphy. All right, so with me today is Mr. Cheynne Murphy. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's really good to have you on board, Cheynne. How have you been?
Thanks for having me on. I've been good. I've been very busy. We were just chatting about that before. We're probably living busy lives. So.
We surely do. Can you tell our listeners about yourself and how you became a musician? How long have you played music for?
Well, I like to say it's 3 chords and the truth is what got me into music, because I literally picked up a guitar at fourth year at uni. So I was doing a marketing degree and my parents were very happy with that. And then a guy down at the student accom a few doors down had an old nylon string guitar, and I'd hear him playing it and I'd think, wow, geez, that sounds amazing and I should really play. And I was into my early 20s at that point. I hadn't sung, hadn't played a note of music, and I bought a guitar off another friend in that same college complex. Yeah, and I learnt Jack and Diane, I think was the first song, which is an old roots American guy. And it was literally A, D, and there was an E in there, and the whole song was that. And that's literally the 3 chords. And I thought, this is incredible. And then I started listening to the Beatles, going, wow, this is like 3 chords. Oh no, there's 4 chords. But it just astounded me how simple the construction of the music was if you could find the right melodies, with chords. So that's how I got into music, was just playing, and then I just got obsessed and I was writing more songs than I was learning. I just started writing and and I basically, as the story goes, I think it was something like I had a rehearsal in the student accommodation just with some really amazing musicians. Again, I just feel like I was such a newbie in the early 20s, and they all had musical training and so on. But I think the first song we played was U2, Bad, the song Bad, and I was in this room and singing, and I just felt I was liberated and freed. of so much stuff. It felt like a weight off my shoulders, and I just went, I felt like I found it. I found what I wanted. And so I just practiced for 6 hours a day, and we signed a publishing deal with Warner Chappell within 2 years or something, or 3 years of those 3 chords. So,
wow. Well, that's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Cool. And do you remember what year that would have been, roundabout, give or take?
I'm not so good with years, Yarn.
Okay,
I would say what signing to or just beginning the music journey. The year I would have been really starting to get into it was 1992.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, so and there was it was a really fast beginning with this publishing deal, which is, you know, focusing on songwriting, and then a really protracted, you know, so I'm still, what are we, 2021? I'm still writing music just about every day, still looking to record music, and, you know, it's just that beautiful, I like to call it, it's just inspiration. If you've got inspiration in your life, it tends to make you happy. So I kind of work back from that. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a tough business. Don't worry about that now. Just enjoy the inspiration.
And you just recently released your 4th album. So I can assume that a certain virus that we all know about threw a bit of a spanner in the works for you there, or how did you get through the Corona times? Because that would have been about the same time. Is that right?
Correct. I was, you know, in the mid-process of doing an EP, and I'd actually sort of presented an EP, and then I kept writing, and I felt like I wanted to put it out as an album, not have an EP and then an album, that sort of approach. And yeah, just the sort of starting to engage with social media, with new ideas. So with my Facebook network, and kind of I'm always a little bit sort of hesitant to do that, because you don't want to just be this self-promoting musician and come look at me. And I feel like there's a lot of musicians that are just trying to promote or sell something. But what was different in this situation was that I was presenting a song idea and inviting people, if they felt compelled, to share their musical, you know, their flavour without any sort of real conditions on it. So, you know, I call that just sort of free expression, and just got a great response. And you know, and so just use that process of sending a, you know, Pro Tools MP3 and telling them don't cut it at the top or the end, and just record your consolidated track and flip it back to me. And so I actually finished that album just recently. I've just put out at the end of February, which was a few years in mostly non-COVID time. And then, yeah, I finished an album, which I haven't recorded officially, but I'm actually thinking really strongly that I'm just going to do a homemade mix of just the shit that we did, you know, through COVID. Right. And even though everything was done, like the drum tracks are just stereo mixes and things like that, just work with those raw ingredients and see what we can come up with, because you get this unique thing happening when someone's just playing without any, you know, no one's like, I'm paying this session musician to come in and play. They're just playing because they feel like it. So I probably have to go back and give a few bucks to some people just to, you know, just say thanks, or as we say in Australia, I owe you a case of beer.
Yeah, right. So online collaboration was basically what got you over the line there, by exchanging files and then getting a file back of the same length. Is that the method you use? You mentioned Pro Tools?
Yeah. So like, as you know, knowing that this is about production and home production, I've had a very simple philosophy from day one. Like, I've always believed, say, percussion, as long as you can play in time, I don't need to spend thousands of dollars on a shaker. Yes. You know, nor a tambourine. And for me personally, because I'm really big on harmonies, that's one of my parts of my sound. My father used to be into the Beach Boys, and, you know, there's something about harmony. I feel it's a much easier and cheaper way to get the same feelings you can get with strings, if you know that your way around the oohs and ahs and layering and so on. So you get this really human version of strings, is kind of the way I look at the harmonies.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it. I love that.
Yeah, and you can feel that in the music too, and most people will say that they love harmony-based music, so that's already established. So my particular recording setup is a very, very simple, like it's just a good mic and a decent performance. So through the COVID time, more and more, most people spending more time at home. I personally just love that insular sit with your guitar. I think I perform best at home. I think I play best at home. I think I write best at home. And so therefore it makes sense to record at home as much as you can. So I really have a preference for doing the vocals at home because I've got that beautiful luxury of going, nah, like I find if I listen to a vocal, because being a vocalist and self-producing is a very challenging thing to do, but I feel that if you sit with it, it's like sort of like writing poetry. Sometimes when you write it, you go, oh, I don't really like that. But then you sit with it and maybe you pick it up a week later and go, oh, that's actually quite good. So it's a similar thing with the vocals, but it's almost reverse for me. Like I'll listen to it and go, that sounds quite good. And then I'll be sitting in the car like 2 or 3 days later, I'm like, I just need to straighten that line up a bit. And I'm singing this a little bit different here, and I'll go and redo that. So, and because vocals are one of the most important things in vocal-led music, geez, I'd just say that's the great starting point, isn't it, at home, if you can record a half-decent vocal.
And what's your situation at home? To record vocals, obviously you need to think about the room acoustics and ambient noise and, traffic noise. So was that okay for you?
Well,
how did that go?
That's the thing about a self-produced musician without any training or any background. You're fairly free because you're generally just going on vibes. And, there's a whole bunch of people out there that have done it before, like the Neil Youngs and, as I said, Ray LaMontagne. And so I'm aware of a bird. I don't mind a bird, and because my music style's folk rock, I sort of feel that that's okay. But for some reason, the randomness of life, where I stuck my vocal microphone, I've been playing a few live tracks just with the guitar and the condenser mic and just really loving that sound. And people have commented on that. And I'm like, well, there's no, it's like a $600 mic. There's no plug through. It just goes straight into the Mac Mini, which I think you recommended 10 years ago. So I still just do the same thing. And I look at Pro Tools looking for sort of not peeking too much into the yellow and find my way around that way. And then I like somehow, you find your own little sort of process around that.
You've been in professional studios with, high-end engineers and really well-renowned producers before. So
yes.
How is that different? What effect does it have on the musical outcome to now produce yourself at home, to wear the hat of the artist who needs to focus on the singing and the intonation and the performance and the story and the lyrics, and at the same time you got to be the engineer who needs to look at all the technical things. Does that take from it for you? That's
a really good question, because I'll paint the story of the first proper studio I went into, which is Billy Fields, has a studio called Paradise Studios that they, recorded some classic Australian albums, the Angels, Air Supply, just a whole bunch. And it was all to tape, 2-inch tape. It was all at that point not automated. This is pre-Pro Tools. And the intensity to get the performance, I feel I can hear that. Whereas I feel, and that might be good if you're singing really hard rock, but if you're singing something quite intimate and you need to be pretty relaxed, then sometimes I've found not being in that focused studio environment where, I even had a specialist vocal producer come in, and I think it's good stuff. Like, there's no doubt about that. I think it is really good for what it is. But it's not like that the song, I don't know, like I think since Spotify has evolved, people's listening, as long as you can get it to a certain level of production quality, it just depends on how that song is feeling to the listener. And is it a decent song? Has it been well constructed? So we recorded in that studio to 2-inch tape, like a string quartet, like Sydney Symphony Orchestra people. I had a piano player who scored it. He forgot the scores on the day and he was stressing out. He was writing it on any bits of paper he could find off the top of his head. It's pretty crazy. And I think this studio environment, it does allow some great bonding. At that point I was in a band and, I was sleeping on the couch and you get this full immersion. And I think that's probably the best benefit of the studio versus the home studio, because the home studio is like, how long is a piece of string? Whereas in the studio, it was like, you have to get this nailed. But on the downside of that, I was under this huge pressure of the money that was going into it. I think the total cost of it was, from memory, it was around 23K.
Ouch.
Yeah, and that was for something that we were just going to do like in a matter of a couple of days. And it ended up being 10 days and, you know, all the mixing. And that was actually like, there was a lot of mates' rates that went into that for 23K. So without that pressure, I think it allows people at home to create inspiration. And because the music market is so goddamn competitive, you know, you have almost an unlimited reservoir of this same product. I mean, I know that a purist would say, look, you can't compare Bruce Springsteen with Neil Young, but if I could hear Garrett Cato, and that makes me feel good, you know, and I heard a song of his today, a local Byron boy.
I love his music, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And so it's you know, from a marketing point of view, they call it like substitution product. There's just so much product there. So if you're in that environment and you still want to create, you're inspired enough to do that and you want to share it, then I just don't see any known reason to man why you wouldn't invest in the home studio, particularly if you're a singer, and get your little signal chain up. Don't be too ambitious, just know what you do there. But I mean, I've worked with Anthony Lysenko, and he was, you know, RIP, wonderful producer, sound engineer, and Paul Pilsnenix, you know, who's done incredible stuff here at 301 at Byron, and Jeff Martin, and you know, and they'll do guitar, like the guitar sounds, we'll spend hours on guitar sounds. And one of the guitar sounds that made it onto one of my records, I recorded at home, you know, we're paying attention to amp placement, microphones or whatever, and I'd bring it in to Anthony. I remember bringing it in and saying, and he'd just go, oh, Shane. I'd say, just do your best. And he fuses into the track, and then I can A-B that album, like the stuff that we recorded in, you know, $1 million studio, like the K, and it's not like it stands out, like, but that is because the genre of folk rock allows you to have the nuance of it's a bit wild, it's a bit rough. So that, you know what I mean? Definitely. If it was pop music, it would be a different conversation to have, and I actually filmed that at home with Toby, my guitarist, and, you know, I've got the original take there, and you can just see us working, you know, just in our short, you know, just having fun. We just got out of the beach, out of the surf, and bang, he knocks out the solo, and it sounds really great to me. And yes, the sound quality could be better, but the performance was great.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm very big on focusing on the performance over sonic qualities. And if people give me stuff to mix, what I always look for is, you know, the beauty of the moment. You know, I try to figure out what the people were feeling when they played the music. And you know, if the focus is entirely only on sonic qualities, that beauty can get lost. Yeah. So I couldn't agree more with you there. I'm exactly on your side.
Yeah, and my first inspiration to share, because you asked the question about home studio, was actually I watched Playing for Change like way back. I can't remember the very first instance of it where they were going around with a laptop and some headphones and a little bit of gear. That's actually what inspired me in 2008, and I started an EP called 5 Songs for the Soul, and I recorded it in a really big studio, the drums. So I'm a big fan of getting the drums right in a decent studio if you can, if you're going to be allocating budget. And then you pull the tracks back and you start building, you know, different things. Yeah, at home. At home, but not even just at home, because there's a local guy who plays trumpet and used to be in Buddy Rich's band called John Hoffman. He also played with Sinatra. And I met him in the hall at a uni one day. I could hear the trumpet, and I said, wow, that sounds amazing. And he was American. He's like, yeah, Shane, like, it's good to meet you. You should come up sometime. I said, yeah, well, I want to come up and record you. I had no idea who it was. And I go up with a laptop, you know, and I record him in the kitchen, SM58, the cheapest, nastiest Rhodes mic you've ever seen. You know, well, sorry to Rhodes. There might be a sponsor here, but no, it's the entry level. And back then it wasn't so crash hot. And so I close mic'd the SM58, and and the one behind. And I just said to John, is that how you usually do it? Like record a trumpet. Now this guy's, as I said, played with some of the most incredible people around the world. And he was just totally comfortable with it. The wife was having a cup of tea in the lounge room. And, you know, if you've got an opportunity to share files with the program, it'd be wonderful because I'll share this particular take. And he said, I'll just slur this. And I just layered 3 or 4 takes in that situation. It sounds beautiful to me. And so that's taking the laptop to someone's house, because you would never get that opportunity with something like that. And they like that they just wake up, have a cup of coffee. Yeah, I'll do that for you. And he's like, how much? And I said, how much do you normally charge, John? After I just gave him a quick 50. He goes, are you sure, Cheynne? I said, yeah, here, take the 50. He's like, so what's your going rate? I think I asked Paul. It's like $300 an hour. So you get this sort of flexibility when you prepare to go to people's houses with your laptop and your setup, and it expands your the possibilities of session musicians, but it also keeps it way more in budget if you can do that.
Yes,
so it's still home recording, definitely. But it's just, I mean, that's why I stick to the laptop, the M-Box Mini, you know, one really good condenser mic.
Yeah.
And I like the idea I can go, and I've done it heaps of times. I'll even record drums with that one mic, you know, using the one mic technique, and get that roomy sort of sound just when I'm demoing and I want to hear how a song's starting to sound. And I find that, you know, you can go over and share a glass of wine with someone and they're quite prepared to do that and hasn't got to the serious level yet. And I just always say, well, when it gets serious, like, you know, of course I'm going to give you some money. But, yeah, I mean, it's the life of the indie musician.
Okay. So let me just sum it up. You said that, you know, for tracking drums, you actually prefer to go into a studio with a proper room.
Correct.
But basically everything else that follows, like bass, guitars, overdubs, acoustics, electrics, vocals, harmonies, horns in this case, you would probably prefer to do it at home at the other musicians' houses?
I would do that out of necessity, to be honest. Yeah, and I think the motivation, I did this. I've done a few albums where my second album, Celtic Heart, like, was so much of it was done at home. And for example, I met a guy who plays Irish pipes, you know, Matt Conley. He's a local guy in Byron, and you don't often hear Irish pipes. And, you know, I just recorded them in a room, and so you get, yeah, exactly right. As long as you've got a great drum take, you can DI bass. That's wonderful. And most bass players know what their sound is. And I think also it depends on yourself as a producer. If you're someone who really wants to micro control everything and every note and every part of the process, I think you'd really struggle with this approach that I'm explaining. But the approach that I've been doing is basically giving very little direction to the musician, but I'll say, I think I can hear, I just recently recorded a lap steel guitar, and it sounds amazing. That was in his home studio, not mine. And it was just basically, I can hear it coming in on the chorus. And nothing more than that. But I knew the guy and I knew his ear for melody. So I knew that, you know, if you pick a jazz guy to do something for you, be careful if you're a classically style melody. So, you know, it's all about the ingredients, isn't it? Like of a soup or, you know, or of a meal. Essentially, you are cooking something up with that approach, with the approach where you're not, you know, doing everything in those 2 days in the big studio, and you've got to be much more planned in that sort of situation, whereas you can be just a bit more spontaneous.
Thank you for sharing. That's really good stuff. I love that. Cheynne, if that's okay, I would like to change direction a little bit and tap into your wisdom regarding music marketing. I know that you're a bit of a specialist. I'll take a deep breath now. Look, let me just share a little story of one of my first releases when I was younger and played in bands. And I remember how we rehearsed every week like crazy and learned the songs. And we tried our very best to prepare ourselves. And then eventually got to the point where we saved up money and got into a studio and recorded it all. And it was a huge mission to pull this thing off, never having it done before. And eventually we got it to the finish line, and, you know, there it was, finally mixed and mastered, and we loved it. And we felt like, okay, finally done. And now it's out. And then we realized a couple of weeks later, we are still sitting on this box of CDs. And what now? I find that, this is often the case, that younger musicians often don't see what's after that point and, think the mixing and mastering is the finish line. What advice would you give to that young me from back then?
Look, the clearest advice I would give the young me and that young band, anyone listening to this podcast, is it's absolutely imperative that you don't just put all your money into the product and have not a brass razoo for a graphic artist, for a photographer, for even just a basic live video, right? A website. You got nothing left in the tank. You just went 10 grand on that EP all day long because that's going to get us over the line. It don't work that way. I can tell you for 100%. So, and one of the reasons it doesn't work that way is that most musicians will believe they have it. Everyone thinks they've got it. And I can tell you, don't be so sure. There's a lot of music out there in the space. So what is usually the differentiating factor is someone that doesn't put 10 Gs into the EP but puts 6 and has 4 left over to leverage, say, a really good PR person that's been recommended. They've got money left to do a really decent, live video for $500. And they allocate that $4,000 really strategically to be able to continually, promote the song or the EP. And so that would be the first thing. And the second thing that I would probably say that I think's very profound but also messes with an artist's mind, because they get most inspiration out of the music and the song, but re-engineer the process. So you actually think about, it's done now, what am I going to do? What time do I have? What resources do I have? Like, is this realistic? Am I okay to blow a bunch of money? Is that okay? So it's almost like you're re-engineering it, because the thing is, you can still get the inspiration. You can still do some great stuff at home. It may actually be better to put that 10,000 or the 5,000 into a home studio. And then you've got this longevity of creating this product. So the re-engineering of just pausing, and thinking about downstream, like what would be the date I'm going to release it? What am I going to release? Like, what is the single? Have I done any research into that? Have I actually played it to anyone? Because in record company world, they have a thing called the A&R team. And me as an indie home recording musician, I have my own A&R team. And they are people that I trust. I've got a team of them, of songwriters and different people. People have more of a flair for production, and they'll hear things in mixes, and I'll present songs to them well before I'm going to the studio for the 10, getting to that spot. I'm sitting on a bunch of CDs. And if you re-engineer the process and you think downstream, you probably wouldn't produce many CDs. You wouldn't go for that deal that they're offering where, you get 2,000 CDs for, just this little extra money. I mean, the poor environment. Like realistically, how many of those are you going to sell? And
yeah.
So there's a lot of just relaxed thought, visioning into the future, just these things. But the important thing is that the song itself doesn't sell on its own. And I have spent, a good 25 years in the music industry, and I know I've met some of the top people in record labels and managers are in the entire country, and I know their process, and I know when you put something in the CD player, they've heard 1,000 other tracks of that. First question they asked you, so tell me about this artist. What are they up to? How much are they playing live? They want to know, is there a buzz? Like, they'll go onto social. Is there any social proof that there's actually a market for this? This is how business people think.
Yes.
So if you have no market at all, but just a lot of passion and self-belief, I wouldn't hang my hat on that as a business strategy. Just be very careful about that. And I think that's the difficulty as an artist, because it is all about inspiration and passion at the end of the day, but doesn't always translate into the business world. And so I think it's a difficult thing to get the marketing hat on and go, okay, well, who's going to do the promotion? We've got the product, pretty happy with it, but what's the promotion plan before you even start the product, so that your budget is much more balanced?
That's great advice. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So you basically would plan the marketing ahead of time. And
correct.
a lot of people nowadays don't release their albums anymore, but a series of singles, let's say a song every month. Do you believe that this is a smart way today?
I think it is. It is a smart way today for an indie musician that's not like got much of a push behind the song. If you're dealing with the major labels, like it's a big release cycle for just one song, it might be 6 weeks or 3 months. So the idea of doing that every 4 weeks with very little promotion may not really yield you too much results, but you get awareness and you got that consistency. Yeah. But probably the most important thing about that, again, is looking downstream and looking at like your brand, your overall direction. Like if you're just releasing a song every 4 weeks and the production's completely different and every song's different, I think that's messy. Mm-hmm. That's a messy channel for me to listen to on Spotify. So
definitely consistency is quite important in business. Consistency is important. People want 100%. To receive the same quality that they had before. It's just like when we go out for dinner. If we have our favorite place and suddenly the food tastes different, you don't want to go back. We actually want to go back to the quality that we know. We have an expectation and we want this met.
Correct. And it's a good question to ask yourself if you're doing this single approach, that what's the end game there, and can you wrap it up into an EP? Because then if you do that, then the artwork of each single should relate to each other and should relate to the final EP artwork, and it looks like a collection, it looks like a meal. And
so it comes down to the concept behind it. It's not just a selection of random pieces. Yes. It's actually, there's a concept behind it where you maybe decide to release one song first, follow up with a video, a couple of photos.
Correct.
And then the next song, and then you do the same again.
And that's probably a really good thing to do at pre-production phase. So, hey guys, we've got a bunch of songs here, so we'll throw them on the table. Now, let's have a think. Is there any sort of lyrical concept, or is there some social concept, activism? What's happening right now? What would be a good thing to present and say, as an artist?
That's the message, what the artists basically are known for, what they stand for.
Yeah, exactly. And that then fuels, like for each song, like for each single release, you then push that messaging, which has got something related to the overarching EP message, but then you've got the individual song that comes out and it's like about flowers, so there's a lot of flower images, or it's about trucks, or because you're a country artist, or whatever your thing is. Each song has its own story, it has its own narrative, it has its own visual identity, but it needs to be connected to the next one if you want it to be a piece of art, like a triptych. Like if you're a painter, sometimes you paint 3 bits of art and they're similar and they sit together. I think, in terms of music, for me personally, I'm from an older school, but I like a collection and a concept. And then I like to bind it together, and I like to think of that before I go out with that.
Okay, I got it, yeah. So effectively it comes down to telling a story and feeding the audience one bit at a time, but it's a continuing, ongoing story. Yeah, I really like that. And nowadays with social media, there are lots of tools like, the Facebook business page and other tools that allow you to sit down on, let's say, one evening and schedule the social media releases for the next couple of weeks. Is that something that you would recommend?
I would recommend that to anyone on the call. Yeah. If you were in your ideal organized world, you could get rid of a lot of the promotion in like short bursts that stretch over long periods of time. So, and this is a concept that a lot of artists struggle with. But like, let's say, for example, we know the flower song is coming out in 6 weeks, and we know the posts, we know the visual identity that's going to follow that in Instagram. We know some of the narrative or the story that may be presented in Facebook, and we know when the video is being released in YouTube, and we know that the banners are all going to change at a certain date and the messaging is going to change, and now we move on to next song. And you have a calendar, on your desktop, but same calendar appears in social media, and you just go, this would be a good photo for this. This would be a good quote. It's supporting the idea of the song, supporting, here now. And it has this methodical nature, actually. Yeah. If you can be that planned artistically.
Yes.
Like, back to your thing about song by song, you just kind of write, like, what's he talking about? We just write a song, But I think if you tune into it, the marketing process can be a really creative expression. And I love iMovie, for example, and I love playing around with iMovie. And, I've got my tripod, which I should actually be filming a bit today, in my bag for that very reason. So that's another thing, get a tripod and document the journeys, because that all becomes part of the scheduling and this constant output of stuff beyond just the songs. So that's your ideal world. So it's not just a song. It's just this peripheral imaging and storing that's just coming out, but it's all like it's leading somewhere, and you get it. You're not kind of confused or like, I thought he was into folk rock, and now there's some heavy stuff coming out. And
since everybody has smartphones nowadays, if you have a tripod and you have a rehearsal, why not record it? And if you're driving to a gig and you're having fun in the car together, why not take a little video and just get everybody hyped up about it and just make a collection of little snippets that can be used in social media?
100%. And it is the long game. It is about the long game of that. If you're strategic and you want to play the long game, and it is also understanding your own connection with that. So not everyone needs to be this just in your face social media person around their music. So beware of reading all the guides that are out there for indies of how to do stuff, because some of it could actually impact negatively on your music or your sense of self or whatever. So in that way, you might say, well, I think it's realistic for me to release, like 3 stories a week on Instagram. I'll release something on a feed once a week. And then in Facebook world, I reckon I'm going to post just on this day and this day. But I might schedule it all and do it all on the one day. But just get a feeling or a sense of what you can actually sustain and what feels good. And this whole weird area of, like, you read a lot of stuff about business, but actually if you're an artist, you've got a creative brain, you've got your inspiration, so you've actually got to translate that into the music, into the branding, into the stories. So instead of using the word brand, which people go, oh, it's a brand, it's just an identity. And people like to connect to identity, like to people, we're not robots.
The people that I relate to on social media are people that give me a sense of who they are. I get a feeling of who that human being is, and I get a feeling of what their values are, what they stand for, what makes them smile. Those are the things that connect me. And if that's ongoing and consistent, then I feel like I'm part of their story. And I know some business people who do that really well, but definitely lots of musicians as well.
Yeah, it's a strange new world.
Yeah, it definitely is. Okay. And outside social media, is there other elements or other platforms that you would recommend to focus marketing towards? What about paid marketing? Should people pay for marketing?
That's a good question. There's hundreds of people out there that are going to want to take your money to do courses. I would just look into them carefully, read reviews. There's an amazing community they're called Indie-trepreneur. I don't know if you've heard of them, and I've studied a lot of these people since the early 2000s, and they have a very active community that kind of solves problems in the same way that the Apple community seems to solve problems for Apple, and Apple doesn't need to have their customer service people there all the time. So I liked that when I looked at their community. So as far as getting back to your question about Facebook advertising and Instagram advertising, 100% that stuff can work and it can boost your numbers, that's for sure. And then an email marketing, community around you, that can be really good too. But make no bones about it, it's hard to make a consistent good buck selling your music and streams and all of this stuff. So everything that you hear about the streaming is bloody awesome, but don't be there waiting, on your family, and don't have a job because you're waiting on the streaming check. I think it comes back to the question that we said. If I'm reining back the $10,000 budget for an EP because I want to do it in a great studio with all these people and strings or whatever your budget is, but you rein it back to the $6,000 and you got $4,000 up your kitty on what to spend it on, then I would spend it on. I'd definitely have a website, make sure I had some cool merchandise available there, and still sell digital downloads, be more progressive in the options that people have and the bundles that I would sell. So I definitely have a website. I definitely have a presence on all the important social media. And if I'm not on that social media much, I'll just let people know, hey, you've just welcome to my Twitter page. I'm not really here a lot. Sorry, guys, but I'm over here. And
good. That's a great idea.
And you're constantly redirecting them into your world where you live, which might be.
I should do that.
Yeah. So that's another good. That's another good strategy. And then you've got to invest some of that $4,000 into quality content, of course, and quality branding, which is graphic art and photography, and then the rest of it, as far as I'm concerned, goes digital. And there are some incredible YouTube videos. Find the guy or the girl that just speaks to you. Have a look at how many people are viewing it in the comments and just get a read on them and just do exactly what they say, you know, and that can be perfect. And then you'll get your feet straight in there. Just go, let's give this a crack. This is a great strategy to start building Spotify numbers. But make no bones about it. You might invest $100. You might get 100 new monthly listeners. You know, this is the business of it. Now, what do I get back? Not much. So a lot of this music, there's a lot of investing to create more popularity, but there's a certain point that can sustain you. And people like Garrett Cato that I met busking on the street here, go and check his page out. He's about 1.2 million monthly visitors, and he's a whole income from that. There's another guy, Jacob Lee, that I've chatted to, and he's about 900,000 monthly listeners. So there's a certain point where something can take off, and I think that comes down to the quality of the music at the end of the day and it having a resonance with an audience.
Yeah, I've met him once, Garrett, and he's a lovely guy. And he
does production.
His production is phenomenal. Yeah, I have a lot of respect for him, and we had a lot of tech talk. But when I watch him on social media, it's lovable. Everything about him is lovable. There's never anything where I said, I disagree here, or, you know, it's always very positive, and I just get a good feeling from it.
Yeah,
and I think that's
the word's
that's
the
one of his secrets. Yes, it's very authentic.
Yeah,
it's perfectly in line with who he really is in person.
Yeah.
When I met him in person, that's who he is.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not like he's putting a face on when he's in social media or anything like this. He's exactly himself in a very good way, and shows the best side of him.
Yeah, I mean that's lucky if you can do that. And I think that you're right. Find your lane and stick to it. And there isn't a particular rule. Like I think I noticed him. You know, we're both family guys, and his daughter appears in there, and in funny sort of contexts, but not often. But yeah, he's got a daughter, and that's why he feels so much, I guess, with his songwriting. So it is on brand, as you say. Yeah, that's great. But yeah, just summarising that website, a social media network that feeds into that website. The website's got some nice merchandise. Don't design a website and just leave it in the corner like some little abandoned child. Populate it with some cool blogs, because that provides content back out there in your social media world. So there's basically an interrelationship between your social media and your website. It's feeding in your latest Instagram, and it allows someone, particularly industry people, to very quickly summarize what you're about on your website.
Yes.
If you're an industry person and you present to me your Facebook page, I've got to think about who you are, and I'm still searching, and then I go and look at a video on YouTube, and I'm eventually piecing things together myself. The website should do that.
Yes. It's like a business card. It should do it very briefly and very straight to the point. And it shouldn't be wordy or shouldn't be difficult to find. It should be immediately clear, I guess, from what is said, the words, but also the colors, the look of it, the feel of it.
Yes. Yes.
Good. Yes, that makes perfect sense. Okay, so and then we have distribution, of course. With the music needing to get out somewhere, and obviously digital distribution is a standard workflow today. So, have you got any preferred distributors that you can recommend to other musicians?
Look,
that you're happy with? Or?
That's the least of our problems with distribution, but there's. I go, I shouldn't say this to someone who's a bit of a mastering engineer, but I've been doing a lot of just cheap mastering through Lander. I pay $60 for the year, and I just can master all my demos. They do offer with that unlimited release. So that's what I like. For me personally, I like the unlimited release, and I get the value out of it because of unlimited release. So people have to just check stuff out there. It is strokes for folks. I've been studying it for 8 years about who's the best digital distributor. Just look at what they're charging you each year. Just again, looking downstream, be realistic about what you're putting out, and they'll all get you on Spotify. And it all looks the same at the end result. So if CD Baby, for example, have a very active community around them, so I'd suggest, even though they're taking a percentage and there's a little bit of money up front, you're actually buying into a community there. And it's probably the same with TuneCore, but I've heard like just the way that they structure the money side of it's not the best result for someone. So the best thing is if you Google Ari, A-R-I, Ari's, put an S there, Take, distribution, he's actually done it all and he's got it right there. Because other issues you think about is, do you want to be in China or not? And he's done a big spreadsheet that he updates, and he's the only guy on the internet I know since 2014 that's done it properly.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's really good. That's probably something that I should put in the show notes.
Yeah,
for sure. So for all listeners,
I'll send you the link.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And the marketing serves the purpose that we get a return for all the effort we put into our art. And there's then long-term income, I guess, from streaming, which is, as we all know, not much. But it will probably build over time. Is that your experience?
Yeah, I think it's
build your catalog and keep promoting old songs. That over time it starts to first turn from nickels into a lunch and eventually into a little bit of passive income.
The traditional avenues are still there. Like the record labels still should be approached. The publishing companies, like the business side of things, is still moving on. It's gone digital with the key blog makers and the reviewers. And there's a lot more independent stuff there, and the control that majors had over radio is kind of reduced. So look into community radio as well. And really, I'd say that the main outcome, God bless us, when COVID leaves, is playing your ass off. If I could say anything, then stop right there. You can make $200-300 as a soloist every night, and it's even bigger in Europe. So you're playing a lot. You got that money, and then you've got your digital download cards. I use USB sticks that are really quite popular. Like I actually sourced them from Alibaba, which took a while to get through the sort of the Chinese translation to get something I was happy with. But it's a 2 gig USB stick for like $3. I think in Australia I might have to pay
that's good value.
$7 or $8. And so the return on that with 4 albums on it, I can sell it for $20 at a gig. And it costs you for 2 gig USB $15 at Officeworks. Mm-hmm. So, and it's a reusable thing. So I think being really creative with, again, back to the bundle, what you've got available, gigging your ass off is the best way to make it, in a way. And you send stuff out. If you can connect with the industry, do it. If a label's interested, do it. You don't have to. DIY is a misconception. Do it yourself is the wrong approach. Yeah. Involve people. Involve that video maker and say, hey, I'd like you to be part of my team. So there's there's DIY. I need your help and I'm willing to give what I can give. I think that's a different philosophy. It's still independent, but it's more team-based activity. And
yes, I couldn't agree more. That's my experience as well, that the most successful people often have small but effective teams.
Correct.
And nobody is doing it all. If we just look at what we've discussed today, songwriting, recording, playing the music, performing, producing, arranging, recording, mixing, mastering, and now all that promotion stuff, who can do all of this really well? Nah. That's impossible. Nobody can. But, I think we all know our strengths and weaknesses. Yeah. And I think it comes down to forming small teams that complement each other. Yeah. Where there's, let's say, maybe one band member really good with recording and somebody else is really good with photography and how this can then form a whole that actually works.
And that's actually super fun. And I love the idea of photo shoots. I've just recently done some photo shoots with my girlfriend. She does better photos than a lot of people I've worked with. Because it just, it feels good and it's creative and different. And I would say, like, to other, you know, as an independent musician of many, many years, you know, like 25 plus years, 4 albums, like there is the long game to it. So just try and lower your expectations maybe a little bit. You know, yeah, you could be the biggest thing in the world. I thought that, you know, on TV, getting signed to deals and meeting people from Sony. But there is a long game to it, and it takes us back to the start of the conversation, which is about inspiration and really getting sustenance out of jamming with your friends and, you know, what was music all about. So that can stay with you for the rest of your life. So you're already blessed. Just be careful about overloading it with too many unrealistic expectations of what could happen, because I'm a really big believer that there's a lot of unknown quantities out there with music and what resonates with an audience and a big market and what doesn't. You know, and if you're doing something super progressive, for example, you might feel like an island for a bit and then suddenly, bang, Tone. What's Tone's name, the artist Tone? Oh, goodness. With Dance Baby Dance. So she's a local Byron girl and she's super unique voice, doing nothing and busking and then just blowing the world apart, you know. That's a really good example of there is an unknown quality. So you are playing the roulette wheel of life as a musician, and yes, something could be amazing for you and it could all go incredibly, you know, astronomical into the vortex, or you've got this beautiful thing that you do that you're inspired by. You've got a, you know, home studio, you're a songwriter, you hang out with your friends and it's good for mental health, and you can have that as well. So I just, you know, I don't mean to, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to like give people false hope, because I feel like on the internet there's a lot of people giving people false hope. Do this with me and you'll be a star. That is the biggest BS.
Yeah, I fully agree that can't possibly work, at least not for many people.
No, you got to listen to the song first. You got to take there's so many other variables, you know, before that happens.
Okay, good. I think, Cheynne, we should probably wrap it up now. You got to head off to a radio interview, so thank you so much for making the time today.
Great to be here.
Just maybe one last question: if listeners would like to find out more about you and your music, where should we send them to? Where would they find out about you and your music?
You can just Google CHEYNNE, which is a weird spelling of Cheynne, and Murphy, MURPHY, and you'll get straight to my website and all my details. And you could do the same thing in the Spotify search engine, CHEYNNE. Okay. Everyone misspells it. That's why I'm being very particular.
Look, I'll put it in the show notes as well, so it's just a click away. So everybody, please look up Cheynne online and check out his music. So thank you very much.
Check out Yarn's mixing, man. Awesome stuff.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for joining me today. Cheers.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much, Cheynne. I took so much out of this, and I think there was some phenomenal wisdom in this episode today. So if you are new to marketing, there is obviously a lot to take in. And the hardest part of it is to actually get started. So it doesn't really matter if you don't get it right on the first attempt and that you might miss a couple of opportunities. But the most important thing is literally to get into motion and get started, and to develop routines and habits of promoting your music on a regular basis. You can then refine it and make it better and see what works for you and what doesn't. But the important part is to actually get into it. So after you finish this episode, choose one or maybe two things from this episode and put them into action. It's a huge chapter and there's more to say, of course. So next week, I'm going to chat to Daniel Musgrave, who's a marketing professional, and he's going to expand on what Cheynne shared with us and go a little bit deeper in some sections. So I'm pretty sure there will be lots of good stuff in there for you. Thank you for hanging in there with me today. It was a long episode. Please share this episode with all your friends. Subscribe. I would love if you could give me a 5-star rating, please, in your podcast application. I hope to speak to you again next week. Thank you. Have a great week. Till next time. Bye for now.